Good evening. I would like to welcome you to the January 12th ACSD board meeting. The current time is 6:30 p.m. At this time, I would like us to do introductions, and we'll start with Jason.
Jason Chance.
Mary Heather Noble.
Ron Matcliffe.
Jeff Venable Novak.
Ellen Whelan Weist.
Wendy Baker.
Barbara Wilson.
Suzanne Beck.
Alpha Blankman.
Jay McCall. Steve Cash.
And are there any board members online as panelists?
Oh, let me Steve over.
Laura said she was coming on as well. Okay, Steve, you can introduce yourself. Steve O.
You may not be able to hear you.
Yeah. Steve, can you hear us?
There we go. Steve Orzek.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. And in the room, our admin.
Sonia Efline, Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Restorative Practices.
Natalie Colazo, Assistant Superintendent of Specialized Services.
Courtney Cron, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Matt Correnti, Director of Finance and Operations.
Thank you so much. And Laura said she would be potentially joining us as well, so we'll keep an eye for her. Next.
She's on.
Oh, she's there.
Oh.
And Laura is also, so we'll move her over and let her introduce herself as well. And thank you, Jason, for driving the Zoom.
Laura Harthan.
Thank you. Next up, if I could have a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
In a second. Okay, thank you, Jamie. Any discussion, changes? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by saying nay? Any abstentions? Okay, the agenda is adopted as warned. Next up is our first public comment period. There is no public in the room. Is there anyone attending remotely who would like to make a public comment? If so, raise your Zoom hand. Okay, seeing none, we'll continue. Next, I would love to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 5th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes from January 5th, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes have been approved. Next up is ACSD bill approval, and I'm going to hand it off to Jason.
Okay, Suzanne and I approved 3 warrants today. A payroll warrant dated December 25th, 2025 for $1,105,646.91. A payroll warrant dated January 9th, 2026 for $1,133,518.96. And a general fund warrant dated January 9th, 2026 for $1,330,000.66. We had a few questions that were all answered today. So I move that we approve the bills as read.
Second. In a second, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the bills as read by Jason, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the bills have been approved. On the agenda, at this time, we have report of the student representatives, and Nava is here. If you have something you'd like to tell us, that would be awesome.
We are currently, we have an update on our project where we're reaching out to schools and hearing more of student voices. So what me and Taryn wanted to focus on right now is talking to students at Shoreham and Bridport because, following the board's decision to consolidate those new schools for the following year. And I think it'll be really interesting when we talk to them to hear some of like their worries and what they're excited for, their emotions on that change that's upcoming, because we previously talked to kids who just went through that change down at Ripton or at Salisbury, but kids from Ripton. And so we're starting with there's a lot of schools. We're starting with Shoreham. We reached out to Principal Whitmore. And so we're planning for next Tuesday, 2 Tuesdays from now, the 27th. Yep, the 27th. And we're gonna meet with a group of them in the mornings. And so hopefully we will have some more feedback to share and continuing on with that project there. So that's really exciting. That's moving in a positive direction. With kind of school board across the state stuff, there was kind of a pause over December and then recently, not here, but at all those other schools, they just went under a lot of their midterms and finals weeks. So that took a pause, which is really great because they're very respectful of, the fact that we're all students. So that is kind of starting back up, and that's cool because all the budgets are being finalized kind of right now at this time. I mean, obviously, we get another presentation today. And so at the next meeting, which is Thursday, this Thursday, at 8, we will hear a little bit more about what those boards all across the state are kind of deciding. So I'll be able to hear more about that. Yeah, and then at MUHS, our semester's coming to an end. And so all of the students, the freshmen and the sophomores who are in kind of the standard MYP classes, are going to be kind of entering totally new classes. So this is the second year of this happening with that new full type of schedule where you're taking completely new classes. So that is something that's going to be kind of changing in our school a little bit, and students will be adjusting to that. But yeah, that's what's coming up on our end.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you for that. That's great. I'll just say that the Community Engagement Committee had a meeting at Shoreham as well, and we mentioned that you were going, and people looked forward to that and seemed to be appreciative of that idea. And so I just wanted to tell you that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, and look forward to your next report.
Yeah.
At this time, we have reported the superintendent.
Okay, we have one appointment and one retirement for your consideration. Relative to the retirement, many of you would know Elizabeth as Lily Foster. She's served the community of Salisbury for, I think, 40 years. I think just about 40 years. And she, has recently become a grandmother, which I can appreciate, and so she's going to retire from full-time service. However, I believe we have successfully procured her expertise on a part-time basis next year. As she's very highly trained in some really wonderful reading practices, and she has a real love of helping students break through that early reading work. And so I think there's a very good chance that we will be able to have her continue to serve ACSD kids, and obviously she's just really had a distinguished career here. And so it's always nice to point that out for those that just might not have met her or know that. So those are there for your approval.
Okay, thank you so much. Can I have a motion? Go ahead.
I'll move to accept the appointment of Kevin Moore, custodian 1.0 FTE, and accept with regrets and congratulations the retirement of Elizabeth Foster, interventionist 1.0, and hers is effective June 30th of 2026.
A second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the appointment of Kevin Moore and accepting the retirement of Elizabeth Foster, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions?
As per usual.
Yes. Steve and Laura, thank you.
So next up, we have perhaps the final budget presentation. And so Matt has some slides to share with you that should look largely familiar as we move into the last stages of this work.
Thanks. So far fewer slides tonight, and our mission here is to bring you up to speed on what's changed between the last version and tonight's version 3.
And Matt, are they being shared on the Zoom?
This is, the screen is shared. So.
Okay, on the Zoom.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, thank you.
In version 2, which is the last one that we looked at a week ago, we had a total expense budget of $52,995,189, which was a 5% year-over-year increase. This version increases that slightly. We're going up to $52,999,495, which turns it into a 5.1% year-over-year increase. Once we've backed out the offsetting revenues, we get ed spending in version 2 of 2.8 and version 3 of 2.9, as you can see there. So only a 1/10 of a percentage point in both total expenses and ed spending. One of the charges from the board that led to some changes in this version was the addition of a 0.3 nurse back into the general ed cost center. We also, in between then and now, have been working through the distribution of benefits for interventionists who exist partially in special ed, partially in direct instruction, and partially in our grant funds. So making sure that those sets of distributions were all calibrated correctly. We also baked into this one the 11% tuition announcement from last meeting from the Career Center, as well as our projected enrollment for next year. So between those sort of knowns and then some other minor cleanup, we can see here that the general fund subtotal comes in just around 51 million. 1.83% year-over-year change there. Adding on to the general fund are our additional funds. There were no changes here from the last time. And as you can still see, we've got planned increases in our federal consolidated federal grants, so the Title I, Title IIA, and Title IV. And then special education federal grants are IDEA-B and IDEA-B pre-K, and then Medicaid and MAC EPSDT, so our medical services grants. On the money-making revenue side of things, we have same forecast for tuition, state and local grants, our special ed block grant, revenue from our other funds. Those are the funds that were on the previous slide, those federal and state federal grants, and then the fund balance transfer, a lack of a fund balance transfer. So that's completely unchanged from the last one. And so now, considering those expense changes and the revenues which have not changed, we have our ed spending revision here. As you might remember, total expenses minus all of those revenues equals our ed spending. So you can see here we went from 2.8% or 2.81% to 2.91% in this version. And you may recall that this is the metric that we kind of looked at our 3% growth factor on. So we're still, in this budget staying below that target goal. With that ed spending in mind, the next thing that we need to consider is our enrollment and weighted pupil count. So at this point, we're on version 7. Hopefully the final version will come out and it'll be the same as version 7, but this has still not been finalized. I put a hard to read but easy to appreciate chart in the upper right there, so you can kind of track the progress from what the first version of enrollment was from the AOE. That's about 2667, all the way up to where we are hopefully going to finish 2722. But that's kind of been the storyline over this budget development cycle of these incremental upticks and then one last slight downtick over the version history of the enrollment count as the state collects data from the schools, verifies that data, plays tug of war with some of the data, and finally verifies it. So that's kind of what's going on behind the scenes there. Where we land represents 0.65% change downward from where we were last year. Now we're able to calculate our per pupil spending by taking our ed spending and dividing it by that weighted pupil count. That gives us an ed spending per pupil of $15,638. That is an increase of $541 from where we were last year in the current year budget, or 3.58%. If anyone's been paying attention to the news, this is the line that we would be affected by if the 3% year-to-year growth cap were enforced. That, as initially introduced, was on the per pupil spending, not on the general ed spending. We are, as you can see there, still 4% below the spending threshold. With that, we are able to calculate our district tax rate, and by dividing by the preliminary yield, which has been adjusted to the state CLA, and our tax rate discount, which has also been adjusted, we get our adjusted and equalized district tax rate of $1.65. That represents 3.5 cents of increase from last year to this year, or 2.19% change. Any questions on how we got from the budget to the district tax rate? The last slide is how that district tax rate then goes through the CLA machine. CLAs are still the same as they were during last week's presentation, and will remain unchanged. They're a factor of that equalization study that comes out. It is a fixed data point. The yield is still variable, so if we're back here, that yield over the course of the legislative session is still subject to change, but these CLAs are not. So we can't call this a final district tax rate at this time because of the yield, but we wouldn't see any variation in the adjustment factor here. If the yield holds and the budget is approved, the tax rates that you see would be part of the FY27 plan. So as you might remember, we have three of our towns, Cornwall, Ripton, and Weybridge, who saw recent reassessments and are looking at a major decrease in property tax rates. And then we have Middlebury, which is a good example of a CLA that comes in very close to 100%. meaning it's right at that state average of around 70%, and therefore not much of an effect on the tax rate for that town.
Just a reminder to the board and the public that last year, I think it was Salisbury, Shoreham, and Bridport that were in the negative 49% and other brackets. And I don't remember anyone from those towns letting me know that their taxes had actually dropped by that much. So, it's not a one-to-one. It's that does not indicate what will happen to individuals' tax bills. That is just really talking about the CLA activity that has gone on in those towns.
Right, the tax bill is of course made up of two pieces of information. It's the rates and then the value of the property that you're paying the rate on. So if the value of the property goes up, you don't need as much of a rate to get to the same number property tax bill, but a drop of 50% of the rate would not in and of itself lead to any tax relief per se. We know that we saw a 3% or 3 cent growth in the district rate. You'd also need to factor in the municipal rate and what's going on the town side of things to get to some sort of a rough idea of what a town and school district combo tax bill would look like next year.
Okay, so at our last meeting, we had charged Matt of including the 0.3, and so we could take a look at what that looked like by adding the 0.3 nursing staff FTE back in, and that's what this is. And so we have to decide, do we want to go with that? We don't have to as a board. So I would love to entertain some discussion or even a motion. Go ahead.
I move that we move forward with a budget that includes the addition of the 0.3 FTE nursing.
Okay.
Is that the amount that's up there? Are you moving the amount, Ellie? Ellen?
I don't understand the question, Wendy. Sorry. What do you? This version, the version that has, I assume,
0.3 included.
Put back the 0.3 that had been previously removed.
So Matt, if you give her an amount, then your motion, if it has an amount, it will have that in it.
Got it. The version 3.0.
Yeah.
So I move that we adopt version 3.0 budget, which would be in total $52,999,495.
Okay, thank you. A second.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Go ahead, Suzanne.
My question is, since FTEs typically fall in operations, is that, I know you put it in because the board wanted to see what it would look like is that something that your side of the fence is comfortable with and feels is necessary, or?
More nursing never hurts, in that sense, and I think the schools are happy to have additional nursing. The nurses are happy to provide it, and as I think I mentioned in our update, usually staffing relative to health is done in the spring relating to student needs, particularly. So how that plays out, we'll see where our students are and what that looks like. But we're certainly grateful to have the staffing, and we will always let you know of staffing that is outside of the staffing rules that we've established and what that looks like. And if it's the board's choice to add some of that additional staffing back in, then we certainly appreciate and respect that. Our students will be happy to have additional nursing.
Okay.
Yeah. Steve has his hand up. Steve Borzak.
Is there a hand? I'm sorry. Steve.
Hi. You kind of answered the question already, Dr. Baker, but could you be a little more precise about if that 0.3 is being added to the budget, because that's what is happening? Is that going to be, because it was based on the removal of nursing services from school, from a school that was being consolidated, is that going to go back into Bridport, or has that decision been made yet? I guess I want some clarity about where the additional resources are going to go, or has that not been determined?
And that's not been determined. And just a slight adjustment, Steve, to your statement. Remember, we had nursing services at Ripton Elementary School, so this is the first budget that those have come around, as well as a recalibration of what would be needed for when Bridport and Shoreham are together as a learning community. So I respect the principal's process in the confidentiality of student needs, and that typically plays out in the spring. So we would not make a commitment to those things under any year circumstances right now, and I would hate to usurp that important practice if I could beg your patience on that item. We'd like to not commit to that right now until the principals have a chance to talk it through.
Okay, Mary Heather, and then Ellen.
Yeah, I'll just speak up in support of this. I mean, essentially, it's the same nursing for essentially the same number of students. I mean, there's some less students, but we're just reconfiguring them into different buildings. But again, I can't remember who said it. Might have been Steve Cash at the last meeting. Looking at nursing needs is not necessarily a ratio thing. Makes some sense to me. So it makes sense to me to keep this resource in for the number of students that our district serves.
Okay, thank you, Ellen.
Yeah, I was going to say the kids aren't going anywhere, and depending on what students need, that need doesn't disappear because a building has been consolidated. And I think we heard really helpful testimony from nursing staff and also from board members about how nurses work with students even when they're not physically in a building, who they are responsible for and who they have a relationship with and knowledge about. So it feels like an important service to not reduce, even for having reduced the physical footprint of the district.
Anyone else? Jason?
I just want to thank Matt and the folks in the district admin, because it's a truckload of work to put the budget together and make it appear, almost effortless. So I appreciate that, and thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Jess.
I'll just add that I'm also grateful for the version 3.0. Just knowing that there's a lot of changes in healthcare across the country, and in Vermont, healthcare is precarious. I think now more than ever, having more medical professionals interacting with families cannot be a bad thing. So I'm just glad that we're making this decision.
And Suzanne.
Matt, are we how close to being 100% sure on that weighted student number, that's where it's at? I mean, that plays a major role in this, so I know they're tinkering with that and CLA numbers on the state still, so.
I hate to go on record, but I think that that we're there.
Okay.
With that. I think that the only and moving piece at this point in time is the yield that would need to be adjusted by the legislature. And it's pretty common at this time of the year to have that as an unknown heading into the budget approval and the town meeting process. I can't remember sort of an 11th hour surprise creating wreaking havoc on people's approved budgets because of that, but it's just one of those things that's still outstanding.
Okay.
And it seems that there is still a little bit outstanding based on your email today.
Our half a student.
That we're fighting for, and thank you very much for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process that is really difficult to understand why it isn't more accurate. All the systems feed into each other. It's not, this shouldn't be having so much difficulty. I mean, we actually fairly lucky in that there are districts that have had to fight for 300 or more students, you know, that are still many students down. So it's a concern that we would continue to use a calculation that is figured out like this in such a hefty way. I also just want to remind the board that that while we have concluded as the work we can do, and I believe that we are presenting a budget to the taxpayers that is responsible and serves our students well, the legislative work can take very unpredictable turns. As I know you've lived, those of you that have been on the board for a little bit, across Champlain Valley, our average, gen ed spend is probably up about 4%, whereas that's compared to our 2.91. There are some districts whose gen ed is up over 9%. And, so when all of this comes in, right, it feeds the political conversation. And so, I don't want to sit on any position that would suggest that, there will not be further conversations we need to have, but we have done the administrative work that we can do on the operations side to present you with a spending plan that feels reasonable for students and meets our goals relative to affordability. I appreciate, Matt's work and the building principles. There are so many hands, and the finance committee was a tremendous help. Finance committee and friends, who come and talk about how can we share this information. Many of you came to a training where we talked about the terms, and so that you really, that all really matters. And it's nice to be in partnership with you in this just complex time.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Steve?
I am curious with that LTWADM, if I was to get the question from a member of the public, knowing that it is a number that is kind of put together in a very unique way, to say the least, especially version 7, is it fair or even reasonable to say in FY27 our district will be educating 18 less students or 17.8 less? I see Matt shaking his head, and I just wonder, is there a way to make that even close to digestible? And I know that is not a student count, and it's not even, because if you say we are educating one less classroom per year, people can understand that. But if that's not even reasonable to say.
Steve, I think in the appendix of either last or the one before it, there's a breakdown of our LTWADM.
Yeah.
It's probably version 6.
Yeah.
But it would have a pretty close approximation of where we landed and show the effects of enrollment. It's 2 years of average enrollment, so it's last year and this year smushed together.
Yep.
And then the effects of weight, including the shifts in age, the shifts or lack of shifts in EL or poverty, so all of that's in there.
And it's not correlated. There's no easy way.
I think maybe the way to think about it is that by the state standards, our students are not costing much more to educate this year than they did last year, or in this 2-year average than they did in the 2-year average before, because the change is only 0.65 right of a percent. So I think that is, if you presume positive intentions, the long-term weighted average daily membership is designed to be able to tell us how many resources should go into our student body. I think one of the glaring errors in that formula is it doesn't take student performance into account. If you are an elementary school student that does not have challenging socioeconomic circumstances or speaks a different native language or is living with a disability, But you have challenges in math, and so you need extra supports in math by way of intervention or other things. There's no way for those costs to be represented in this formula. And, the hope is that as the legislature figures out what they want to go to next, they will actually be able to take that into account more deliberately as they move forward. So that's the best we can do.
And I think I just overall struggle with the concept.
I
think, I get it. It's not a straight student count. And in some ways, I feel like it takes some responsibility that I think maybe we should have to make some of those decisions about resources for students, but that's another topic. And where it goes for me, I do appreciate everyone's efforts to put the budget together, knowing that this is our first budget with one less school. It's just hard to figure out how we explain that. It's a district tax rate that's going to increase by 3 cents, and we've closed one school. And so are we just able to say, well, could be worse?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is...
I think what we have to do is think about those cost drivers that Matt presented way at the beginning of this process. And as was true with last year, we have avoided cost by really fine-tuning the budget and making sure we're putting the resources where they are. So had we just did a level-based budget, we would have gone up, independent of the fact that we're operating with one less school. And the amount of savings with one less school, it's really hard because when you have combined grade classrooms and now all of a sudden you have single grade classrooms, the cost of our budget, the majority of it is the staffing, right? So the staffing hasn't changed. Yes, there is some building facilities costs. It's a little different, that kind of thing. But the cost is really driven by the staff and the benefits and that kind of thing. So it's really hard to be able to say, oh yeah, look what we just did.
I think there is an easy way to capture it probably. A rollover budget is usually about 6%, right, of increase. The amount of money saved by not operating Ripton Elementary School, net the resources that have followed the students in other places is approximately little over 1%, so now we're down to maybe 4.75%. That would be an increase, and the difference between 4.75 and the 2.91 that we're looking at, because the other pieces that are increases are really, we're getting offsetting revenues to those. Those are cuts. Those are cuts to our budget. Which we also made last year, because we did not have a rollover in that way. So had we not been operating the same number of schools, we would have probably had a little over 1% more cuts to make in order to be able to meet the feasibility target that you gave us. So, obviously, those things are important. That is not an indefinite strategy. That is not a strategy that is going to manage the affordability crisis across the state. So I think maybe that's the way to put them together.
Yeah, and that's, I think, more concerning as far as this budget and what we're doing. I don't have concerns necessarily. It's more the trajectory and how we continue to stay ahead, because that is a steep price to pay for those savings, and it's only a successful strategy for so long.
And we have to remember too that we made a decision, with the Shoreham Bridgeport to actually add resources that were keep resources, right? Thank you. To keep resources and direct those resources in special roles, right? For literacy and mathematics that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So that too factors in what we're seeing as well. Because we had the ability with this particular budget to actually do that. In the future, who knows if we will have that ability to do that, to really strengthen and stand behind our strategic plan of really trying to make a difference on the outcome side. I think, Mary Heather, you had your hand up and I interrupted you. Did you?
You just said what I was going to say. So.
Okay. Sorry about that. Stealing it. Are we ready for the vote?
And you also have Ellie online now.
Okay. Hi, Ellie. Are we all ready at this point for the question?
Yep.
Okay.
We're voting on my motion, is that right?
Yes, we are. And so let me move to the page where it has the actual words so I can repeat it. Sorry, I should have been there. I thought paper would make it easier. Okay. Okay, so the motion is all those in favor of approving the total expense budget, $52,999,495. Please indicate by saying aye.
Wait a minute.
What?
What year? For which year? FY27. You
Okay, for FY27. Sorry. Excuse me.
No, you just gotta have the year in there so that we make sure we're voting on the right thing. That's
Okay, for FY27. All those in favor of approving the total expense budget for FY27 of $52,999,495. Please indicate by saying aye. I think we should do a roll call because we have people that are remote.
Sure.
And sorry about that. I think legally we are, for something like that, supposed to do a roll call vote.
If you can start on that and...
Okay, Jamie.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll pass because unless there's a tie.
Aye.
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 I vote aye.
Aye.
And then online, starting with Laura.
Aye.
Next, Steve.
Aye.
And Ellie.
Aye.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much.
We have a couple of other procedural things for you to approve, and Matt's going to continue to take us down this list.
Go. All right. Let's see. Might just pull up the board materials.
Tuition rate is next.
Looks like 11 or 17.
Yeah, there it is.
Everybody see? Yep. So it's tuition time again, and we are sticking with the same process that we use to calculate an announced tuition each year, which is to start by taking the allowable tuition from last year. And remember, this is a lagging figure that gets sent to us from the AOE based on the total costs of our budget and operations for the year. The allowable can be more than what we announce, and it can be less than what we announce. And based on either one of those outcomes, we're allowed to bill for, we're required to bill for some of the difference, or to refund some of the surplus if we wind up overcharging. So if we take the FY25 allowable and use the 3.1% inflationary factor, we get our FY27 rates of $19,998 for elementary and $26,826 for secondary tuition for the year. You can see there's a section that says what I just said. Worth noting that this year we will be able to bill for some of the undercharge from FY25. Since this was added to board materials, I realized that we have actually to back out the 3% cushion. So instead of billing for 10%, we're billing for 7%, which would be about $70,000 in revenue adjustment there. So that's the procedural side of things, and does not change the recommended motion that you can see there at the bottom.
Hey. Yes, I'd love a motion.
I move to approve the tuition rates for the financial FY27 budget of $19,998 for elementary tuition and $26,826 for secondary tuition.
And a second.
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion. And I can't see anyone online right now because of the whoa. Hey, I can see that now. I can read it. That's awesome. Okay. And are we ready for the question?
Yes.
Okay. The motion is to approve the fiscal year 27 ACSD tuition rate at $19,998 for elementary K through 5 and $26,826 for secondary 6 through 12. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed by saying nay, and any abstentions. Okay. The tuition rate has been approved.
We have, as the next order of business, board approval for the annual meeting articles and the warning language that will be used for voters on town meeting day. I don't know that we've had board approval for this in the past. Maybe, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have.
We didn't print a recommended motion, but the as you can see here, there's a four articles to the annual meeting this year. Article 1, as always, is to elect a moderator, a treasurer, and a clerk. Article 2, to hear and act upon the reports of the school district officers. Article 3, to see if the voters will authorize the board of directors to borrow money by issuance of bonds or notes not in excess of anticipated revenues. It's authorizing the funding of the school district, and then to do any other business. So that's the same sort of standard article language that you would see each year here.
Okay. So let's just step through each one and approve it. So can I have a motion to approve the warning for the annual meeting?
So moved.
And a second? Okay. Any discussion?
Barb, just a clarifying question, comment.
Yes.
I think where it says A, and there's an A moderator, I think it only needs to say A parentheses moderator, B parentheses treasurer. I don't think it needs to say A moderator, A treasurer, A clerk. It's a little confusing.
Okay. I mean, that would be easy enough to make that change.
Sure.
Yeah. Are folks fine with that? So we'll just go ahead. Okay. Any other comments, corrections? And if you're online, Jason, you'll watch that for me if there's any hands. Seeing none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of approving the annual meeting warning for February 24th as corrected, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? By saying nay. Any abstentions? Okay, that has been approved.
The final warning for your approval is the Australian ballot articles and the meeting locations, which you can see here. I'll read through all of them. But in the articles, you can see Article 1. This is standard language that we are statutorily required to use. Shall the voters of the Addison Central School District approve the school board to expend $52,999,495, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. The Addison Central School District estimates that this proposed budget, if approved, would result in per pupil education spending of $15,638, which is 3.58% higher than the per pupil education spending for the current year. In Article 2, the vote shall the voters vote to close Ripton Elementary School. And then in Article 3, the elections, shall the voters vote to approve the election of 4 school board members from the nominees, 2 from Middlebury, 1 from Bridport, 1 from Salisbury.
Okay. Can I have, yes, Jason?
Do you want a motion first
Yes.
before we discuss?
Yes, I would.
I move that we approve the Addison Central School District's special meeting March 3rd, 2026 warning as warned.
Okay, thank you. A second? Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Discussion. Okay, Jason.
Article 2, is that all we need to say?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's all we can say.
It's very terse. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. That's all we can say. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Nothing about like selling the building back to the community. Like that's what people are going to ask. Like we close it and
Correct. I mean, we certainly can bring it up as part of the annual meeting, as part of a conversation. I imagine that would be a natural discussion point. But according to our legal counsel, that is what we must say and what we can say.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Steve. Kat, I need to go. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Which one?
Steve O's. Yeah, or Zach.
Yeah, I think I remember that this is where we're supposed to appoint our at-large member of the Hannaford Career Board. Vance was appointed temporarily until we had the district meeting. And I'm not sure that, it says the 4 directors here, but it doesn't say anything about electing an at-large member to PAHCC. Should it?
Not for this one, because this is the Australian ballot. What you bring up would have affected potentially the previous one. There is based on history, that position actually has been appointed by the board, as opposed to the town meeting. Right. We did do it the last time because none of us had, that were there at the time that was setting it up had the memory. That was how it's been done traditionally. So that's the reason it wasn't included on here. That it would be done as part of our reorg meeting right after the annual meeting and the election.
So Steve, typically this board has asked for members of the community to write a letter of interest, and then the board has read those and interviewed and then appointed at the meeting where we reorganize. So if Mr. Vance Bishop is interested in running again, then he would just need to write a letter and submit it for the reorganization meeting and then show up, and the board could vote on him then, or they could ask for more.
Okay, but last time we did have an election at the annual meeting, because Lindsay and Mike, we voted on that one. So I thought that was the normal procedure, but I if it's not, then that's fine.
Yeah, and that's what, at the time, that's what we thought was the normal procedure. But in history, that's not how it was done. So a suggestion I have is this, the board at some time actually document the procedure for how they would like to do that, so we don't have to rely on memory. And so there's nothing written that says how this position is filled, right? And so I would love to see the board actually document for future boards, if it's appropriate in the future, how this position is filled. Thank you for that. Any other discussion on the actual Australian ballot warning, which is on March 3rd, 2026? Steve?
I can't say that this is on the actual warning, but if it is related, I just do find it very curious. We just went through, potential tuition spending for FY27, which was 19,000 and change and 26,000 and change. And then on this warning, we have a per pupil spend in the district of 15,000 and change. And it's just interesting that we can approve more spending for tuition students than we can within the district, and I just find that curious. On the secondary students, it's $11,000 more.
Do you want to explain the formula difference? It's a formula
so
difference.
when we calculate the 15,638, that's the weighted pupil count, not the actual pupil count, where tuition is a closer approximation of what the total cost for an actual pupil would be if their weights are considered. So, a student who's a high school student at or below the federal poverty threshold, and an English language learner might count as 4.5 students, 4.75. So you multiply that 15,638 by 4.5 to get the cost of that, or the revenue generated by that one pupil.
So we have a motion that's on the floor right now that we need to vote on. So we could come back and discuss this after the motion.
I admitted, I said it may not be actually related.
So
I knew it going into it.
Yeah, I know. So I would love to come back to that if we need to discuss it more, but at this point, I would love to have us take action on the motion. Is there any other feedback related to the motion and the warning that we're looking at right now for the Australian ballot? All right, so seeing none, I'm gonna then call the question. All those in favor of accepting the warning that is for the special meeting on March 3rd, 2026, which is the Australian ballot, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so the warning now has been approved so that we can get that out to the community. So circling back, do we need more discussion around the tuition rate?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's helpful as a talking point, just if it does come up, of, you know, how it makes sense for us to approve a district that sends students here spending more on those students than we spend within our own district. Because I certainly wish in a world that didn't have consequences that we could spend those amounts on the students within our district as well. Understanding those are two different numbers is very helpful. It's hard for me to know which number is more realistic per se. They both seem quite real in terms of consequence,
Yeah,
but very
the
different.
calculation of the tuition, you know, we say we roll it over, but at some point you have to figure out what the number is that you're going to roll over. In order to do that, you're calculating kind of the base rate plus an average of the special education costs.
I was going to say,
across the district.
the big difference that's the number you see there is net of anything that we are getting with any of our revenues. So our special education costs that are covered by revenues, our titles funds.
Right.
So you know, that's not included in that number, whereas the other two numbers are
That's all we
representatives
get.
of everything, yeah, as it relates to the differences between secondary and elementary.
All right, that is very
It's a good
helpful.
question though, because it's easy to want to, you know, make a comparison across those two numbers, and they're really not the same.
Well, and politically, what happens is, you know, we're allowed to spend $15,000 because the rest of it is revenue that is given to us mostly by the federal government in some way, shape, or form. And yet, when it is politically advantageous for people to talk about how much schools spend, the $26,000 figure on secondary students will be the thing that seems to drive the conversation. So it's an important question so that we all are understanding what it is that we're talking about, because the difference has federal mandates that are above and beyond what we are doing relative to our state mandates. You know, so it's with federal mandates or without federal mandates. You know, those are the different choices. So it's a good point.
Yeah, and it looks, on the face of it, it looks like it incentivizes that tuition. But knowing that they're not numbers that should be compared is definitely helpful to understand. So thank you.
And thanks for asking that question. So I'm sure all of us, you know, probably had that same question and didn't have the wherewithal to actually ask it. So thank you.
Jamie appreciated me asking it. He thought it was well timed.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
The only other we always place an other. The legislature just got into session. You know, I tried to put together some updates for you relative to news and things of that nature. So if you have any questions about that, or if there are any topics that are important to bring up tonight at the beginning, I'm happy to address those. That's really the only other for the evening.
Mary Heather.
I guess I have a question about that, particularly the proposed legislation or around a spending cap.
S220.
Yes, and how that would cap the increase at 3% in total spending. Excuse me, and we're at 3.5 something percent. Have you already kind of taken a look at if something like that were to go forward, where we would need to target those changes?
No. I mean, the conceptual math that we can apply right now, which is what we can do, you know, kind of speaks to districts that are like within 25% of whatever they determine the highest ed spend per long-term weighted average daily member is. And so for those districts, they would, under the current proposal, be allowed to have their ed spending number, that $15,000 and change number, grow by 3%. If you are beyond that 25%-ish, then you can grow by more than that, up to I think 9%. You know, it's an allowable growth rate formula that's used in other places in the nation, and it's, you know, it has these pluses and minuses. It's controversial, you know. For us, if you take a 3.58, right, that's what's on there, and you made that 3 from last year to this year in terms of growth for our long-term weighted average daily member ed spend per pupil, then it's about $240,000 that we would have taken out of this budget, in addition to the reductions that we made. You know, which you know is about 0.5%. So no, I don't know where those would come. You know, that's you know, we would have to rethink that. I think you know, it would be nice if the legislature feels it necessary to move in this direction, to not tie this to a long-term, the pupil number. We'll just call it the pupil number, because you know, if we were to have a drop in that, which can only mean that we have one fewer elementary student and one more secondary student, it doesn't mean that you're or we have you know, our class sizes are not measurably different. You know, it doesn't really impact things greatly, but if we were to have those changes, then that impacts that number. Yeah. And so it is a calculation that feels unstable enough, and we don't have agreement. We're still missing half of a student. Mm-hmm. You know, that does not feel like responsible public policy. So it would be nice to move away from that if the legislature feels it's important. There's concern that there's you know, some retaliation against the redistricting task force for not, you know, having the maps drawn, and so it's set maybe the whole thing back a year, and so perhaps there's a need to ensure some sort of a cap on spending in that time. So that's where it's come from, as I understand it.
Wendy, thank you for always updating us on this, and for paying for such close attention, but the updates are really helpful. I'm curious if you have read or heard anything, or if there's anything in the bill about school construction. And I know, and you sent around articles, and some folks, including from VSBA, talked about this, but is there any acknowledgement of healthcare costs as a driving factor?
No, I mean, it's no, I mean, Phil Baruth, if you listen to the speech they gave, I mean, he acknowledges that many of the costs are outside of school districts' control. I think his perspective, and those who agree with him believe that school districts should have enough changes to make within their control to offset those costs in a manner that would make those increases realistic. I think you know, that's what he believes, and so that's what the governor clearly believes, and you know, that's the basis, I believe, of his proposal. It would mean that we would not have any capacity to bond. We would not, if that type of a cap were in place, we would not be able to bond at all. Mm-hmm. I also learned that for the first time, I don't know how I missed this information, that school construction projects that were approved in 2024 and before were grandfathered. So there are large projects in this district, in this state, that were done in large bonds that actually are not part of the ed spending cap.
Really?
Yes. And I
right as they finished Burlington High School.
Yeah,
yes.
So Burlington High School, Winooski High School, there's a question about whether Colchester may or may not be included in that. So, you know, it is, yeah, that was, I was Friday years old when that information became clear to me. And, you know, I think there will be probably a lot of conversation, you know, at the state about construction. However, you know, unfortunately, it is, I worry that it will fall a bit on deaf ears, because the legislative conversations are more and more overt about how spending on schools that the state, or some in the state, don't believe should continue to run is simply just not going to be facilitated. you know, and they can control that through construction aid and bond approvals. And so it's not a hidden conversation at this point. But just to be aware, if the proposal goes through, even if it goes through, make sure my math is correct, Matt, even if it goes through without the long-term weighted pupil part, and it just says 3% on our ed spending, which is our non-grant work, we're still not going to be able to bond. So that would essentially mean that the spending threshold is irrelevant to us on some level.
You know, they just they've now created a new threshold, which is below the threshold,
Right.
And right where, you know, regular growth would be. Right?
Yeah.
The only like counterpoint to that bill language that I've heard so far is the notion of targeting the drivers instead of the per pupil spending amount, and creating some sort of cap that would restrain the year-to-year change of the actuarial value of healthcare plans and collective bargaining agreements, and there was one other one, but yeah, just kind of targeting the things that go into the formula, the spending increases rather than the spending increases. So.
Yes, Steve.
I would very much like to learn more about those projects that were outside of those traditional education funding routes for construction. So anything you can share, whether it was, I'm assuming it wasn't through the AOE, I'm assuming it went through the legislature.
Right.
But yeah, if that made its way into a bill, I'd be interested to see the bill. So
Well, wasn't it true in the past that capital bond, expenditures were not part of the spending in the past? That's what my memory had served me. Do you remember that?
I thought, as far as I remember,
For ed spending.
Ed spending is always included when we could do funding. It always fell in that.
Okay.
But the bonding and the large projects, the pain is not felt just by that community. It's felt by the entire state.
Right.
So we're all paying for Burlington,
Oh, absolutely.
Colchester, and South Burlington, and all those others that have done there.
There's a facilities committee meeting this week, so we'll see if we can pull together some of that information, for that meeting, if that's okay to add
Tomorrow morning?
as another. That's the one.
Who sleeps?
No one ever died from a lack of sleep.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes, Jess.
Just related to the update you sent today, Dr. Baker, I wasn't able to open the presentation from the AOE on small schools. I don't know. I don't think it was an us problem. I think it was a somewhere else problem. But could you just speak to that briefly, because I wasn't able to read any of it?
Yes, I don't think I could recount the whole thing, but I can give you a snapshot. So you might remember in Act 73, one of the mandates was for the state board to come up with criteria that at that time was commonly referred to as small by choice versus small by necessity. The conversation in the legislature around Act 73 was that there are some schools in Vermont, due to our geography, that are small by necessity. You just can't get more people to them, and if you didn't have that school, there would be miles and miles where students would not be able to access education. Canaan is an excellent example of a school that is small by necessity. If Canaan were not there, then students would be literally commuting hours to be able to access education, which is not feasible. It was the opinion of many that there are a lot of our other small schools that are not small by necessity, but are small by choice, because communities appreciate, as is part of our history and our tradition, small community schools. And so the mandate in Act 73 was for the state board to come up with criteria that would determine when is a school small by necessity versus small by choice. So they have they put together a subcommittee that included Tammy Colby, Cindy Stewart, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the last member. They proposed, they held a little bit of public testimony, and they used some research materials and put together a set of criteria. They define small in the way that our current statutes define small, which is 100 students or fewer. They talked about necessity in a way that leads you down the road of geographic proximity to other schools, and the number of amount of time that students spend on buses, which is a very common metric that's used nationally in order to pull that together. So there are other pieces of information that are in that presentation, and I would commend it to you. If you have trouble accessing it or you need me to attach it as a PDF, I'd be happy to do that. It's definitely going to be something we're going to hear a lot about, in part because the process for moving forward no longer involves the legislature. So the process now is that the state board has approved the work of the committee, and it is now remanded to the Agency of Ed, who will come up with draft rules that will be presented to the state board, and we'll go through the rulemaking process. That means that there will have to be a certain amount of public testimony on those rules, and the board has signaled its intent for the AOE to manage the implementation of that process, which means that the secretary will be in charge of determining if a school is small by necessity or not. The state board would have the choice of hearing those things themselves and making that determination, but it looks as if they are signaling that they are moving that over into the secretary's purview. So we should probably see rules come out quickly, and I would say that based on the political climate, that process will probably, I would wager, move through fairly quickly in terms of how that would be handled. So I think redistricting is not something that will be quick. Determining whether a school is necessary as its size might be quite a bit quicker. That's conjecture on my part.
I just have one follow-up question, which is, does the report say anything about, like, I think about our district, right, and this, not the idea of geography, but the idea that, like, we have 3 of our 5 elementary schools fall into this small category, right? Weybridge, Cornwall, and Salisbury.
Correct. Currently, yeah.
And even if you didn't count geography, without bonding tens of millions of dollars, we don't have even if we wanted to put all of these students in one place, we don't have a place to put them without bonding tens of millions of dollars. I mean, even our report about Mary Hogan was to add, I think it was 40, maybe 50 students. Mm-hmm. Is there any mention of like that aspect of necessity in the report?
No, well, there's a little bit. But I think the more important mention about that comes in Act 73 language, which prohibits districts having to incur capital debt in order to consolidate. Right. So you could put, if there is a school that you could put in Mary Hogan, right, then likely, and it was a school by choice, then likely the secretary would find it wise for you to do so, right? So if you can't be forced to incur capital debt in order to move that process forward. I don't know if that means that you could not be forced to spend capital reserves. if you have capital reserve sufficient to be able to enable that to occur, that's unclear as to how that would be treated.
Right. Yeah, but in our case, it's 20 million to 5 million.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for answering my questions.
It's clearly something we need to keep our eyes open.
Yeah.
And even our community, letting them know that this is happening, when the rules are going to be open for public comment, that kind of thing. I think it's really important.
Yeah, there is some language that is in the presentation around if the expenditures saved will outweigh a cost incurred, then that is something that would allow for consolidation. So there are some allowances for that. I don't know if that means it will tie to some perhaps future emerging capital construction fund for such things, but it is definitely something that is obviously needs to be watched in lots of ways.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Baker on that topic? Okay, thank you for that. Next, report of the chair. The first item is board self-evaluation. We mentioned this previously. The executive committee, per our quality standards, district quality standards for boards, we need to do self-evaluation. So since this is now coming up on the close of another year, we thought it would be a good time for us to do it. And so the paper that you have, you can actually fill out and leave it here and not have to be bugged by me again. It's also for those that are online, was in the board pack, board materials, going back to the old days. So would appreciate people take a few minutes and fill that out, and then the executive committee, we will summarize it in the forms. We'll actually enter it for you, and we'll give you one more opportunity if folks still have, if there's still several that haven't filled out the form. We'll remind you again at the next board meeting. Okay. It shouldn't take long at all, and it's good. This will really be good as we start looking at the next year as a board. For those of us that'll be here and help to decide, are there areas that we really would like to work on? So it's important work. It's good. The next item that...
Sorry, Barb, just
yes.
real quick. The other thing is I can send a link to the online form if that's preferred too. So I'll plan to do that, and you can kind of do either, whichever your preference is.
Yes.
Just don't do it twice.
Yeah.
Please do it once.
Thank you. Next is just discussion on letter to the editor on behalf of the board. The last couple years, we have put into the Addison Independent a letter to the editor that really talks about the budget. Last year, we didn't have time for the board to decide whether or not we wanted to do that, so I basically did it as an individual. And basically, we can't say vote for the budget, but we can highlight what we believe is true about the budget. And so oftentimes what I start with is the message of the chair, which will be in the annual report, the budget book, and then kind of take that and modify it a little bit to make it appropriate as a letter to the editor. So my question to you is that something that we want to do? And I would envision that would be something we would probably do early February, or the first week or two in February to get it into the paper. It's too early now, but it takes time to develop that. And so the question is that really, is that something you want to do? If in fact the board as a whole decides, nah, we don't need to, I may still choose to do it kind of as a member, the chair as an individual. Thoughts? And also what you would like me to highlight in there, I would be happy to entertain that as well. That would be most useful. Yes, Jamie?
I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
And I don't need to help write it, but I'd be, willing to. It's the kind of thing, I don't remember, it's the kind of thing we brought as a draft and then we said, here's some changes, and then that was the next version.
Yep.
I think it's a great process.
Okay.
I agree.
Everybody cool with that? Okay, excellent. And thinking of it now in January is this, instead of like, oh my gosh, it's February, do we have time? Is there a board meeting to do this? So now we can make sure that happens. The other thing I just wanted to remind folks of, and as you saw in the warnings, our annual meeting is going to happen on the 24th of February. It's at 7 o'clock in the high school here. It's typically in the band room. And strongly encourage, I know it's vacation week, that board members attend it at all, cost, right, if they can. And I also wanted to mention that the day before, we had decided that we would, on the 23rd, have our regular board meeting, but that's going to be focused on superintendent evaluation, right? We didn't want to mix the two and try to do it before it, that kind of thing. So we can really give that due justice and not be rushed. So just wanted to remind folks of that. And that is all that I have for this evening. Yes, Jason.
The February 23rd board meeting is scheduled to start at 5:45 p.m. Is that still accurate? That's what it is on our calendars.
Oh, no. I think that was left over from moving it from the 24th to, so let me fix that. Thank you. That would be, there's no reason to start that early. We'll start at 6:30.
Okay.
So good catch. I didn't even notice that. Okay. With that, we can move on to the policy committee. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jamie. And I didn't call you Jason tonight, and I didn't call Jason Jamie.
That's great. The sweater I'm wearing is just giving vibes.
It's working for me.
Thank you.
So the policy hasn't changed much since we saw it last week or 2 weeks ago. We added in a bit on transportation to kind of like massage the way we talk about transportation, with a sentence that says district will offer reasonable options to assist with transportation if possible. As I understand, that was an edit that Wendy added in after being in communication with a number of other folks, I think, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. We added on the very last part, number 14, which basically just says that this policy will works to some extent in relationship to policy D6. I'm trying not to dilly-dally too long on stuff that isn't important to you, because we looked at this a lot last week. But anyway, I guess I could just, what questions do people have about this version?
Are we good? Jess.
Mine's not really a question, but it kind of has to do with my comment earlier as well. And I don't know if it fits with C30, but number 13 about the report that we're going to get. from about application numbers, capacity set, lottery outcomes, waitlist movement, any relevant indicators that are possible and appropriate, and recommendations for future capacity adjustments. Something I've been thinking about, especially as conversations in the legislature are going a certain way, and the idea of like the report about small by necessity versus small by choice, is I would love to have a report that showed us every elementary classroom in the district, the number of students in that classroom, the capacity of that classroom, which I was doing some running around and I went back to our capital improvement slides, which had capacities, but those were by square footage, which I know are not best practice, right? It's more of like how many humans can you fit in this room reasonably. So I don't know if we necessarily even need that number. Yeah, and knowing that we're going to be getting this report, I don't know if it's appropriate for it to be this report that we get that, or if it's something else, but I just want to bring
I'm
that
so happy that you mentioned that.
Oh, well, that's great.
We have already made that.
Okay.
Yes, because you know, if you are okay with this as first read, then you know, it can come up as second read February 9th. And at that time, we would need you to approve transfer capacity in order to move forward. So we've already developed that chart. Principals are adjusting, you know, things based on classroom size. You know, they're starting with we have every elementary school classroom there in each of our K-5 schools. So, you know, you know, in some schools there's only one section of kindergarten, in other schools there are 3 sections of kindergarten. So that's all listed, as well as the maximum class size allowed by your D6 policy. And you know, we're taking 3 students off of that maximum class size at this time to hold spaces for people who move in that area, which is always, that always happens. And then principals are recommending adjustments if there is something that relates to square footage of a classroom. For example, there are a couple of Mary Hogan classrooms that currently hold 5th grade students where they have that in the E-wing. There's that little partition, so actually not all the square footage really accommodates students. So the principals are going through and ensuring that any of those notations are there so that we will have accurate transfer capacity numbers of every classroom. And you know, as it is now, in just kind of a first run through, I mean, we will likely have probably 130 seats across the district. Every school has capacity for transfers, not in every grade, you know, but that's true. And we would only have 2 classrooms potentially that we could not transfer out of in the district, you know. So I think you know, it's coming together well. You know, I asked Dr. Collazo to be ready, should it be the board's pleasure to move in this direction, with an appropriate application and a process, and I've asked her to oversee that process, you know, to be ready to make room in her workload to do that if this is the board's thing. She, because she is a wizard at creating standard operating procedures, you know, that those drafts are already created and whatnot. That allows me to be an appeal if there's something that is a challenge, you know, for that, and so that if there's something that can be solved administratively, we'll solve it. If not, then it would eventually come to you. So you will get that report, and I think the first time you take a look at it will be the 9th if you choose to move forward with a first and second read of this policy. This policy, by the way, the language of this policy, the principals had a chance to weigh in, and our district directors had a lengthy conversation to make sure that any language updates that we felt would be important in the implementation were addressed on the front end, and we gave those to the policy committee. I think they incorporated most of them, so it's helpful.
Jamie.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. I know equity came up a number of times at our last meeting, and I did want to make some space for Dr. Afeline in the event that it was appropriate to share any perspective on this, if that was all right with you. If that's already been done in the policy committee, we don't necessarily need to, but I would certainly be interested in any perspective you have on this.
Well, we've had some great conversations, as Dr. Baker said. I think, the nature of any time you're talking about school choice, just that in itself is going to bring up equity issues. But I think that we've combed through it very carefully and sort of addressed, you can't solve everything, right? But we've addressed what we can at this time. And a lot of it, I think we'll have to just move forward and see. There's inevitably probably going to be things that arise. And we can't predict that. We have to just be optimistic and hope that it works out the way we're anticipating.
Mary Heather.
I have a question about, so it's a little bit of a thought exercise, so bear with me. If you've got, and it may be helpful later on when it's actually in practice to understand, but I'm imagining, so we've got a number of seats across the district. And obviously this addition of number 14 to make sure that compliance with D6 is still in place, and so any request can't be approved if it creates a compliance issue with D6. So I guess I'm wondering how that works for students of some of our smaller learning communities who might want to move, and doing so could potentially create a compliance issue if they leave for some of our smaller classrooms. And again, I'm making some assumptions because I don't really know how close we are to those lower threshold numbers for some of our classrooms. But I guess I'm sort of wondering if you've got small classrooms where the opportunity may not be able to be granted because leaving would create this compliance issue, and therefore for that kiddo, that family, it's not really available. I guess I'm just wondering in practice, if you pan out, does it become more available or more likely of an option for students and families coming from Mary Hogan, for example, where that's not an issue? I'm just wondering about district-wide, equitable opportunity. Is this as available to students and families in our smaller classrooms as it is to students and families in our bigger classrooms? That's one question, and I do have another question that's a little bit different.
So the answer to that would be yes. You might remember that last year, right? We made most of our elementary classrooms. They all average about 15 students. So across the district, there are a couple of exceptions to that. And Cornwall will have a small first grade next year, and they may have a small kindergarten. But generally speaking, there's room for 2 or 3 students in any classroom to be able to move to another. And it's also important to just harken back to one of the things that Jamie shared about the survey results, and that most people aren't interested in leaving their school. Right. It's generally speaking, it isn't related to that, as a whole. So we don't expect a mass exodus out of any one of our schools or any one of our classrooms per se. But it is an opportunity that especially as we've done the initial modeling, it is something that should be available to most families. One other thing that might be helpful is that in the D6 language, I can allow a class to move below a class minimum of 10 if my feeling is that the educational program is not going to be jeopardized. So so there's a difference between 9 and 5, in that sense. But I don't see anything in our initial modeling that would suggest that with the exception probably of Cornwall's first grade of next year, that it would be an issue.
Okay. And then I guess the other question I'm thinking of is, I'm assuming that the spots available, for example, in Waybridge, are spots available in multi-grade classrooms.
Correct.
And that you're not necessarily looking to change that configuration
Correct.
necessarily with these spots. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and that would be the case pretty much every year. You've already kind of designed your staffing, and now you're looking at, here's what we've got left.
Yes.
Based on all those decisions already.
Yes. Yeah. Some of the principals have asked if they could add other sections if more students wanted to come, and so my answer to that right now is that I think the board's expectations is we stay within budgetary constraints as we're moving this forward. So that's we are working with our established classrooms based on our FY27. That said, it would certainly be my intent if there were anomalies that came up in this process, like I'm coming back to you, and I won't hesitate to do that, to say, okay, here's something that's come up. I don't have policy guidance about this truly, and I think it's probably something that you'd like to do together, so I will not hesitate to do that.
And it seems to me you can't look at just one individual school, because it could be that someone actually wants to move to that school too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you have to look at the big picture
Yeah.
to see, who wants to possibly come to that school versus go to another school. So it's not just like one rule fits. It's, you have to work through all of that in order to really make the final determination. Jason.
Can we not have the second or the final read of this policy on the 26th?
It has to be warned for 10 days. The second reading has to be warned for 10 days.
So by this Friday, we'd have to warn it.
Today's the 12th. So by the 16th, it would have to be warned. We can if you'd like.
I would just,
Why didn't we do
is there a
that?
reason to wait till February?
I forget why that may have been my mistake, misreading a calendar. I mean, I think that, I don't know why we wouldn't
It
have
might
thought.
have been the executive committee. We're kind of, I think we talked
What
about
else do
it.
we have on?
No, I think it
I
was
don't
just,
think
I
we
think everything
postponed
was
it.
just, everyone was figuring that
Yeah.
we didn't have enough time to warn it.
Yeah, I mean, it
Well,
would
we
have
do.
to be a special warning, but we've done that before.
Yeah.
It would be great to do it, because what that allows, that we've talked about the policy
Longer
committee, is
window.
just more time for, getting the administrative components of this together, but also families to know about it.
Yeah.
And, not giving 2 weeks for
Right.
people to know that it exists, how it works, and then to decide if it might make sense for their family, and then to put their name in. So the more time we can give this space for people to adjust, the better.
So what I'm hearing, and it sounds that what we could do, and people are in agreement, that we should just go ahead, do a special warning for this particular policy, to give it the 10-day notice so that it can be discussed on the 26th. Is that, and potentially take an action on?
I'm seeing Suzanne behind you.
Suzanne?
So I was gonna make a motion to tentatively accept policy C30 tonight, bring it back for final adoption on January 26th, so that it would need to be warned by the 16th of January.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
I have one. So on this thing that Ellen raises up, I realized on point 7, we listed dates in parentheses, e.g. Those were supposed to be deleted, I think. And we decided that we were, correct me if I'm wrong, other people, but that we were not going to put dates in the policy.
On specific dates.
Specific dates, because it was confusing. Is that an acceptable edit to have that will
It's not a
not?
substantial change,
Yeah.
so it's.
Okay. So I'll make that change for the second read.
If you're doing that, also make the colon after number 14 a period.
Yes.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
We're good.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Steve's got his hand up.
I'm sorry?
Steve.
Steve Worthing.
Oh, Steve.
Hi. I'm not used to voting on a first read, but I don't understand. I guess procedurally, that's how we're going to do it. You know, you don't have to vote on a first read. Just in terms of it's just been warned that we have to do that. So procedurally, that's fine.
Right.
I guess the discussion is going to take place on final adoption on the 26th. And as the policy reads right now, I still have concerns about equity that are not, I don't think are adequately addressed. So I'm not going to be able to support this, but I realize that I'm one voice on the board. So I don't know when we would talk about that, because I'm used to just having the policy go out, people look at it, and then having the discussion on that day. Is that what we're expecting to do, or?
Right, on the 26th.
Yeah.
But
Or you, or
tonight.
now.
Or tonight.
The time
That's
is now.
Yeah, tonight is a good time to talk about it as well.
And also, I'll just say, Steve, that we have a policy committee meeting tomorrow. And so you're welcome to bring those comments tomorrow or email them or anything, and we're happy to discuss them. C30 is the only, or one of the only things on the agenda.
What time is that meeting, please?
It's at 4:30 tomorrow in the office.
In the main office? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I will probably attend then.
Great.
Okay, any other discussion?
Steve Cash has his hand up.
Okay, Steve.
I do wonder in number 8, lottery procedure, kind of the second half, sibling linkages, younger siblings of students transferred under this policy are not guaranteed enrollment in the same receiving school if there's no capacity, but should be given separate priority if transfer capacity exists. Is that clear enough for operations that there's not gray area in that? No.
Yes, that actually was a suggested language by Pietro, and what that means operationally is a separate lottery for siblings. So we can't guarantee if you have a 5th grader and a 3rd grader, and there's room for your 5th grader, and there are 3 families with siblings that are vying for the 3rd grade, the 1 3rd grade spot, then you would be in a lottery with those families that have siblings for that spot. If you are the only sibling that is vying for that spot, then it is automatically yours because you get a preference because you have someone else that's accepted. Does that make sense? So that's a process that Pietro led us through as, there are sort of separate buckets, of preference that we would be setting up, and that lists them.
All right, as long as you feel like that's captured in this policy and translates well enough to what you need to do, I don't have any concerns.
We will be, our procedure documents,
Yes.
authored by Dr. Palazzo, will be crystal clear as
Yes.
we move forward with that.
Yes, that's what I was going to mention. There
Yes.
will be a procedure, so
Yes.
we'll have the opportunity to see how it was interpreted as well.
Yes.
Mary Heather.
This may be a procedure question, but I'm just curious whether if a student puts in an application to transfer and then wants to transfer again, whether
In the
it's
same
back
window?
to their maybe after that first year, they've moved to another school, they've been there, they're dissatisfied. I'm just wondering if there's a limit on how many times the student or family can put in a transfer request, or if that's indefinite.
You don't want them to try all of our schools?
Well, I'm just I'm sitting here just thinking about scenarios and kind of testing it quietly. I'm just wondering how people would maneuver through it. That's all.
Yeah.
And these are I know, probably unlikely scenarios, but I feel like when you're setting policy, you have to kind of contemplate
The unlikely.
So one of the things that, based on Steve's feedback at the last conversation, actually, that one of the changes is there's a delineation between emergency transfer requests and standard transfer requests. So standard transfer requests are the requests that happen within the window. And that's a once a year window, and it's in advance of the next year. So I suppose a family could put a standard transfer request in for their child every year, you know, for reason if they wanted to do that, as the way this policy reads. My guess is that you know, families who might feel strongly about moving their students would probably be more likely to request an emergency transfer. For example, if it didn't work, if it wasn't working out, and it was just an absolute very terrible mistake and a mismatch, they may request that actually the student can be reassigned back to their home school, and you know, that would come through our regular process that handles those things.
Okay.
So I would say that's the more likely scenario.
Helpful, yeah. Thank you.
Steve.
And I do think in number 11, where it says a student is not entitled to return to their original assigned school, like, that puts a fair amount of weight on parents and other decision makers to really think through that shift, because it's, as it's set up, it could potentially be a one-way street.
Right.
While we're talking about chapter 11 there, the next sentence says students requesting to return to their original assigned school during the next available application window will be given separate priority should transfer capacity exist. And in this case, separate priority means a higher priority than...
It means their own. So they would only compete against residents within the town who would be doing the same thing. So if you are, there's preference given to someone who is a resident of the town where they would like to return back to. So if there was one slot in the third grade and there are 3 residents that left that school to go to other places and they wanted to come back, then they would be in their own lottery together. They would not be competing with others.
From another town who wanted that.
Right. Correct. Yes. So there's preference given to residents, and there's that may be wanting to return, and there's or are moving there for the first time. They just bought a house, you know, and they'd like to relocate next to their where they live, and there's preference given to siblings.
I feel like we've covered lots of fringe cases and lots of different scenarios here. This is...
Yep.
So we currently have a motion.
No, Suzanne just had her.
Well, I was just going to say, we do have a motion,
I
but
know.
my last comment was, with any new policy has so much in it and so many different variables, it's going to take you a year or two before you can actually work out all the kinks.
Yeah.
Because you'll always come up with something else.
Yes. So I'd like to, this is great discussion, but it really doesn't pertain to the motion necessarily that's on the table. It's, you know, the content, but the motion on the table, and I'm going to paraphrase what you said because I'm not going to remember exactly word for word, is that we actually move this to second read and have that happen on the 26th, and therefore it'll be warned on the
No later
than the 16th. So this is something we can go ahead and just warn. So
Do we need to vote on that?
yeah, well, because it's a motion. It was made a motion, so
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
and so we'll just do a
Okay.
yay or
Yeah,
nay to just complete it. So all those in favor of advancing this to the 26th and therefore we're warning it on this by the 16th, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
And any abstentions? Okay, so I will go ahead and work with Darcy to just get this warned
Thank you.
for the 26th, and then we'll move from there.
Thank you.
Okay. So any other discussion around C30 before we leave this agenda item? Now we can talk more generally if people have more discussion around the policy itself. Okay, see none. The next thing on the agenda is our second public comment period, and we have no public in the room. If there is public that's on Zoom who would like to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand. Give you a second. Seeing none, then we will then move on to our next agenda item, which is board reflections. Is there any board reflections that folks would like to offer up this evening? Jason.
I'd like to thank the policy committee for the work on C30. It's a ton of work, long time coming, and I think the end result is great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll say something too.
Yes.
I want to offer up some gratitude to the budget folks, all the people who contributed to that. It feels like last year there was like more fanfare about the way we were doing it was like this newish way, and now we're just doing it that way.
Yeah.
But it's no less of a feat, and real excited for it. Thank you for version 3.0. So thanks for that.
Anyone else? I would like to offer to, I know we've had a lot of meetings. There's been a lot of heavy lift work that we've done. I was today drafting up kind of the message from the chair for the book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much here, right, that we've been doing, and it's really our committees that have been working so hard. And I really appreciate what everyone has contributed this past year, every year, but it just seems like so much and so much good work that has been happening over this year in really solidifying things in policy that, we can really move forward with some really thoughtful changes in the district. So I'm really proud to be part of this group. Thank you, this board. Jeff.
Just sorry to have to follow that up. But in the vein of more meetings, the Community and Engagement Committee has another town hall this week. Last week we were in Shoreham, and this Thursday we're in Salisbury at 6 o'clock. So just for the public and also for you all to just know.
Because anyone can go to all of them.
Yeah. We can't all go to all of them,
right.
But anyone out there can go to any of them. It's not like a Salisbury meeting isn't just for Salisbury residents.
Yes.
Yeah, that's written in all the materials, but just a friendly reminder.
And typically, the person on the board from that particular town, we really encourage them to be able to attend if they can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if others want to go, just
make sure we don't have a quorum.
Trisha. I'll volunteer her even though she's not here.
I am kind of here, so yes.
She's here.
Oh, she's stuck in there. She's stuck in there. Ellen.
Sorry, that reminded me that the Friends of Cornwall School, Ron had asked last time if the meeting that they're having with Wendy was something that we could attend, and I reached out to ask them that question since it's their meeting, and they said that they were happy for board members to attend and to listen. So I will be there. It's Wednesday evening, I think at 6:30, Wednesday the 14th. So that's an open invitation to board members.
I've specifically asked Jason and Jamie to join in so that they can represent the work of their committees. That is of particular interest, to the folks. So I always look forward to going to Cornwall and having rich and passionate and curious conversation, and so I think it'd be a nice evening.
Excellent. Anyone else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. It's currently 8:30. Wow.
Wow.
Wow.